Broadcasting from the commodity capital of the world, Zurich, Switzerland, this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
This edition to Insider's Guide to Energy is brought to you by Fidectis. Go to www.fidectis.com for more information.
Hello and welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Today Johan and I are going to go back and we're going to review the year and review the program where we're at. Johan, how's it going today?
It's great. Looking forward to this show. It's slightly different and even more looking forward to do this in person. This is one of the first times, if not the second time, we actually do it face to face.
Yeah, we tried early on when we started this podcast to be in the same room. The intention was to have beers for you watching the video and to do a podcast recording. And then what we realized is we didn't have the technology to do it. So we ended up being in the same building, but not the same room because we're getting feedback loops with the mics.
Correct. And with this new setup, it looks amazing, first of all. And sound is great. And so much easier when you look at someone to speak to someone, right? I love the Teams. I love all these virtual things, but this is different.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly a conversation. We have a soundboard. We've grown. The podcast has turned into a business in and of itself, for lack of a better term. And it really has taken on a life of its own. It's a long way from that first interview we did when we brought you on board to see if we wanted to have an energy podcast. And I think our personal journeys have been quite a bit. I mean, it's a few years later.
For sure. We just celebrated 100 episodes on the main show. And I think apart from all the learnings we have, I think the whole idea of this podcast in general, you know, I probably didn't expect it to grow the way it grew in that period of time, you know, 100 episodes plus all the extra material, all the extra shows. And not talking about the engagement we had on social media, the response we get from our audience, it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fun ride, right? We have 100 shows together on the main show. We've got probably, I would bet, at least another 50 episodes of content that we've done with other shows that we do. And as it is today, there's the main show that's kind of what we call a serendipitous walk through energy, really mostly focused on an energy transition. Then there is a data science program that's in production right now that we're, I think, 4 or 5 episodes into, which hasn't even released. So the audience hasn't even heard it yet, but there's an Insider's Guide to Energy Data Science, Energy Science. The show's really taken off over 100 episodes. We got multiple podcasts that we've done, right? We got EV miniseries, a data science show. We've had the Future Leaders program. We have a job board that's active. We've gone through a number of amazing young volunteers that were either graduate students or early in their career that have been a part of our program for the last couple of years. And it's just been an amazing journey. I mean, pretty frankly, it's been fun.
No, I agree. And I think you mentioned the volunteers that we have on the show. We do this on our spare time, and we've had a lot of good help. And I found it probably most interesting in terms of, you know, these younger people. I wouldn't say that we're old, but younger than us, that has this passion for energy. And you know, if I were in my mid-20s, 30s, energy was probably not on the core of my agenda. And I'm amazed that it is. But once you start digging into it, and I think that's my outcome from the whole episode that we run, this is an extremely interesting area. Complex, but interesting.
I think it's the complexity that I learned, right? When we first started, I was still very naive about energy. It was very binary. And if you didn't say that the world needed to be renewable like tomorrow, I kind of thought you were some right-wing conspiratorial person. And the more you look at the reality of where things are, you realize how complex each and every one of these issues are, and there's no single answer. And so the journey's been interesting. You know, we've talked everything from offshore wind to nuclear power to geothermal, and in each and every one of those episodes, I learned some element. Or you know, we had turbines in the ocean, right, generating power. All that stuff has been pretty amazing for me as a learning curve.
No, I agree, and I think that the whole complexity around the whole energy ecosystem, as we discussed. We have the utilities, we have the, as you mentioned, all the startups and different renewable energy sources. We're talking about storage. But I think the ecosystem in this transformation, is the highlight for me. This is where, individual things, you can learn a little bit more about geothermal, you can learn a little bit more about nukes, a little bit more about solar and how that sets together. But how this is all coming together, I think, is quite interesting. And especially we had a few on the show when we talked about the pipeline in the US that was down for a bit. And you start realizing, who owns the responsibility of this ecosystem. Parts, it's still regulatory, governmentally driven, some is private. And that interaction between these, and we also have the Paradise Fire in California kind of alluding to this as well, that, who actually carries the responsibility for the entire infrastructure. And this I found quite interesting because I don't have the answer to this yet.
No, but it's always policy. Everything we get to always comes down to policy, right? So the technology for a lot of the energies here, the investment is based on policy, right? If you look at the Inflation Reduction Act and it's spiking investment and what it's doing to the economy for starting maybe hydrogen in North America and other technologies, it's always about policy. So the thing that you learn is you can't do an energy podcast and not go near politics and go near people's policy. It would be impossible.
No, I agree. But I think the one thing that stood out a little bit with this was not really the policies of the Investment Reduction Acts. Okay, we put a lot of money into increasing the renewable production in the US. Similar schemes are around everywhere. So I think that's not really a difference. But still, what I think there's been less talk about, there might be talk about it. We had a few guests on, but less talk about is the ownership between the different pieces. So you look at the grid. Who actually owns it? Who will actually build this infrastructure to take care of it? There's one thing of investing, of producing it, but if we can't transport it, the pipeline I thought was quite of an interesting one because everyone was blaming everyone for who actually owned the parts that got ransomed. It's still fascinating to me that this is not really solved or discussed in the matter I think they should.
Yeah, and I think doing the podcast, what it does is it exposes it to a lot more people, right? So one of my motivations, besides learning personally, is bring the audience along for the journey. We try to find guests that we think are going to be interesting. We never really know because we have the conversation during the interview. So it's really a stab in the dark. What we do is a leap of faith. We find somebody that has a topic that they've talked about or has a bio that says, hey, they're going to be talking about a topic that interests us. And then we have a candid conversation about it and bring the guests along. For me, that has been part of the journey that makes Insider's Guide what it is. It differentiates us from different podcasts, I think, because what we're doing is we're having a genuine conversation. There's not scripted questions. There isn't all that. It's really, it goes wherever it goes. And occasionally you and I have gone, clearly we didn't think an interview would go. We brought a guest on thinking we were covering one topic, and we made a hard right and had a great interview.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? Because you always talk about this serendipity walk through energy, and that means really that we do have an agenda because we're here to learn about the energy ecosystem and the energy world, but we don't have an agenda that we're pushing something special, so we can be pretty open. And I think that's also where we always talk about asking the stupid questions.
Well, don't you remember early on when we got our first dose of unhappy fans? Because we take our guests at face value, right? We always tell the guests when we come on, we're not investigative reporters. We just want to learn. We want to hear your story. I believe the audience is bright. I believe we have the ability to ask inquisitive questions. And we had one guest on, and we got so much hate mail saying, well, their business model is flawed. They're a bunch of crooks. That energy model won't work. And I was really taken back when we first did that. And I offered the person that was responding, I said, well, give me feedback. What do you want to talk about? Why is that? But realize that we have day jobs, you and I. We do this for fun, right? Mm-hmm. This isn't a full-time job. We're not investigating everybody we bring in. That was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences probably in the first couple of years of production for me.
No, I think so. And I think that goes back to what we discussed in the beginning as well, the complexity around this. Because if there was a silver bullet to solve this, the way forward, this would have been done. But there, as you said, that there are political interests in this one. There are personal interests around this. There are even academics, there are scientific differences in terms of what works and what doesn't work. So it's not a silver bullet that we're going to solve all this. I think everyone has the same thing. We need cheaper, better energy, and how we're going to produce that differs quite a bit.
So we need cheaper, better energy. That's what we need.
For sure.
Why?
Because if you look at where we're heading in terms of electrification, I think we're going to we're already replacing. Look at where I come from the Scandinavian countries. I think the Norwegian market right now in 2022, 70% plus of all new sold cars was electric. That's going to change something.
We were talking about the need for electricity. Yeah, Johan, you were making the comment that with all the EVs and everything, electrification, that we really do need a different approach or a less expensive approach. I still hold to the premise I had probably early in the first year of doing this with you, is that if it all goes well, the price of energy goes down. Because if you look at the amount of development and everything going in, the pendulum is going to go too far. There's going to be too many projects, and there's going to be too much. So eventually, price comes down. Now, during the interim between now and then, probably goes up because there's going to be scarcity. But things that open your eyes is what's the reality, right? So recently spoke to Graham Cooper at National Grid, and he wasn't worried about the infrastructure getting built. We did all these EV interviews, and we're like, hey, if everyone has an EV, what's going to happen? And the argument was made, well, it's an energy transition, not an energy switch, and that it will get there in time, and there's beliefs to be there, right? So it really depends who you're talking to as to what the outcome is. I guess one thing that would be interesting to me as we kind of have this recap episode was, what technology have you found is your favorite, and what surprised you along the way? What have we uncovered that you didn't know about that the podcast exposed to you?
I think there's, covering over 100 episodes, coming into this is fairly new. Even though I was working for a utility company, it was a fairly new industry for me. Obviously, one of the reasons coming on. But when we talk about technology, there's so many specifics. We talked about wave energy, for example. We talk about a lot of these things that seems pretty obvious to a certain extent. You can extract energy from it. I think the areas that have kind of triggered me a little bit is on the storage fronts. We talk about producing the energy, but the actual storage capabilities, and we had a number of these, not particularly creating the energy or producing the energy, but storing it. From mine storage, we had rocket fuels. There's quite a few things that literally follows the same thing that we have today, that we need, but that I've never heard of before. So I think storage is probably the one, maybe because I was less involved in it. Batteries in general as well.
So storage, I mean, I heard a lot of interesting stories, right? Everything from basically lifting blocks up and lowering them down for kinetic energy to different molecules that you're going to create it in molecule, hydro storage, pumped hydro, whether it be in a mine or elsewhere. What's interesting to me is, for the most part, we're not getting new and emerging technologies that are disruptive, right? The technology may be refined, lithium batteries or different type of battery, flow batteries, or depending on what the use case, it may be changing. But what was kind of eye-opening is there isn't, I'm a technology person from the internet growth, and where we had chips that were changing, we had Moore's law, things changing every 18 months. I don't see that in the core technology. What I see the change is in the architecture of how the power is brought out and how the markets are changing with the distributed architecture, right? So what I don't recall is having an episode where I had an aha moment and go, cool, they're doing storage, something I'd never heard of before, right? Because, we had an OTEC company early on, and that technology has been around forever, just never commercialized. The economics didn't work. We've had, hydrogen, and the economics didn't work, but the technology wasn't new. So to me, what's been eye-opening is there really aren't amazing technologies, other than maybe the episode we're breaking rocks with electricity. That was a new, that was disruptive technology. But I can't think of a lot of new technologies.
So are you, I like that analogy, but is that something you think we're waiting for? Or let me rephrase the question. Is that something you're waiting for? This kind of, I wouldn't say the aha moment, but this one or two kind of new approaches? to this,
Well,
to
I
the
think it's
problem?
important because
Right now, I don't, as you said, I don't think we see the same thing delivered in different packages.
But we also don't see the success yet, and we have a growth curve it's almost insurmountable of what people want to do over the next 2035, 2050. And so if you look at EVs, right? EVs are a very efficient way right now from the technology we have for transportation for individuals and things of that way. I mean, obviously a train or some other way may be better, but EVs are the path. But that doesn't mean that's the path that's going to win. It's less than 1% of all transportation. So there's bets. We're doing EV miniseries. I talk to EV companies every day.
Yep.
There's a lot of invest going into it, but it doesn't mean that's the solution, right? And storage, battery, is lithium the right storage technology? I watched this YouTube video yesterday, and it was funny. It was this gentleman. I think he must either be a teacher or training his kids, and he was talking about energy potential. And he basically puts a 50-gallon barrel on his roof, uses a solar panel that was donated to him, and runs a little pump during the day and pumps it up to run lights all night long. And he basically says, look, here's a solar thing. And he basically used it to charge his phone and other things, literally by putting a barrel and using the gravity and the weight of it to run a little turbine that generated power for him. None of that was terribly sexy and interesting. I mean, it was interesting to watch, but it wasn't nothing terrible or new.
But isn't maybe that I'm not sure the new is the word for it, but isn't that the whole thing then, that we're moving away from, I wouldn't say moving away from, we're complementing the big scale energy production, the big scale energy distribution we've had on the show, we're talking about microgrids, we talked about small scale nukes, we talked about, maybe always bringing it down to private networks around this rather than having it, traditional the way we do it. So suddenly now
that's
that
going to
battery
change, right? I mean, if you remember our interview with Meredith, right? And so talking about the grid and the unintended consequences of policy, right? And so if base load isn't handled, according to Meredith, right? When we were talking about that, what happens? So I generate power and do some shaving of power prices, and I do some interesting things. Somebody's still got to pay for the base load, and where does that come from? And I think the other element that we sometimes lose in some of the distributedness is, the podcast is really focused on the commercial scale of distributed, meaning that, we've had this conversation multiple times. If you're going to do solar, right? And if you're in a low income area or maybe an apartment complex or something like that, you're probably not putting your own solar complex, your panels out. And you're probably having maybe some regional or some solar park that you're getting it from, because the economics don't work for most people, right? So,
But that's not mutually exclusive, is it? Because if you look at EVs, for example, okay, we take the number one, Tesla. Tesla started off with saying, we're going to change the world by EV. Let's sell to the coolest car, the most expensive, best car there is, and from there on, we'll take the profits and we'll build a kind of car for the normal person. I don't think a $70,000 car is normal, but the whole idea around it. And I think if you look at what we see with solar, and I think we had a few on the show talking about solar, building solar both on scale in terms of solar parks, but also in smaller parts where suddenly now the economics is there. So you're not literally buying it due to the fact that it's renewable or that it's solar. You're buying it because it's cheaper.
So
it's the business model.
We're friends. I know you live in an apartment.
Yep.
So what solar are you doing?
Well, because I don't own the apartment, I have no influence apart from being the tenant of it. But if I go back to the house that I have in Sweden, I have a garage towards where the sun, the few hours we have sun in Sweden is up. But
so you get solar for like a week a year.
Basically. The thing is that, I did a calculation of this before we moved down here to Switzerland, and even then the solar was quite expensive, but the business model was there. And imagine now, 6 years down the road, we're talking probably a third of that cost, and it's not stopping. So I don't see why not. And never mind where you start seeing, we had this on a few of the EV guys coming on, and you doing a whole series of EVs where you have the bidirectional as well. So I think, the smaller scale, I think, is starting to become quite interesting. We always talk about scale because it's energy, but maybe not everything needs to be scalable. Maybe you take care of yourself, take care of your neighborhood, and that's a good start.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I mean, I look at the geopolitics of all this, right? You're talking about the EVs and the scale and all. The recent announcement, Sweden having lithium or having rare earths in the market can change things. A lot of it isn't the technology. When I go back to it, it's all about who controls what and what are the economies of scale. So, it wouldn't be that hard to put solar or wind or geothermal. I think we have most of that stuff in the apartment we're sitting in right now, right? And so if we're electrified, we don't have, we do have a fireplace still, which is, not necessarily good for carbon, and, it's a very inefficient energy source. But I think all of that's policy. I think if you're in Denver and you're putting a new development and you're going to have solar on your rooftop because that's what's going to be by code, right?
It's also financially viable.
It can be, but I don't know that it always is. I don't know that it's totally viable yet for everybody.
All right, now maybe not everywhere, but you start looking at places in California, Australia, obviously like abundance of sun.
So
Spain.
Amazing, and you weren't on the interview I did about 2 weeks ago. We weren't able to line up over the holidays. I interviewed this couple that is driving through Africa. So they started.
I listened to it
and drove through Africa and back. And what was really interesting is the misperceptions. So I never really thought you could throw a bunch of solar panels out, get 60 meters of panels, and charge your car in a reasonable amount of time to make it efficient enough to do. Because people told me you couldn't. And you're like, oh, cool, I'll just get an electric car and I'll put panels on, around the property. And what it showed me is you actually can. Their range was 450 kilometers or something in a day. So 24 hours, got them some limited, but think about your normal life. I don't normally drive 400 kilometers in a day, right?
No, for sure.
So to me, that was pretty interesting. It was kind of a little edge from our mainstream topics, which was energy. But the reason it was fun is it was showing a use case or someone trying to make a difference, and they were doing it more grassroots than perhaps a lot of our guests who are actually coming in and solving it top down, right? Most of the time, someone's coming in, they have a battery tech or a storage tech, or they take solar, take sunlight and turn it into jet fuel, or there was all kinds of amazing things people were doing, but those were done on big scale. Those were B2B most of the time. The exceptions were, I think, the heater guy from the UK, the one that had the he would heat water up during the day and had the
for the boilers. Yeah,
I forget what that was.
I know which one you mean. I forgot. We'll put in the links. But I think once again we're talking about literally doing the same thing we've done and just doing it differently in many ways. But if I change the subject totally, you mentioned going off rail a little bit, or going off road, not just literally with this electric vehicles through Africa, but also what really fascinated me from the start when we set up the start of the show. We had an audience that we kind of belonged to in a way. We looked at people working in the energy industry, mainly across utilities and beyond, a little bit beyond, on some kind of senior level that thought this could be interesting. That's kind of who we talked to. Those are the ones we talked to during the day. And then it grew. And one of the things that I really liked when we brought on a few, and we had a few on, were the investors. So suddenly now we got people that, hold on, this podcast is quite interesting because you bring on a lot of guests, you bring on a lot of new topics that we might not have heard of. And this is quite interesting because there's a lot, it used to be at least, I don't know about 2023 now, but it used to be a lot of money available, and there still is.
Oh, absolutely. Last night I was out with an investor coming out of Davos. So I drove down there, and there's a little conference going on right now.
Yep.
And they were talking about markets for renewables and creating some new markets. And there was a lot of conversation because that's my day job is around markets, right?
Yep.
And it was interesting, the kind of things that were being pitched in Davos, over expensive bottles of champagne and over all the other stuff that goes with it, but it will make a difference, right? So I think the investment angle is always important. We spent time, Greentown Labs had us there live in Boston. We did an interview. Our 100th episode was Greentown Labs. I don't know how many companies they've been able to help get funded along the way. The funding is fundamental to all of it. Now, where I'm bullish and why we started the Future Leaders program is if I were 20-something today, if could be, what I would say is this is the same opportunity I had when I was young, when I went through and was in technology during the internet revolution. And it's even better because there's a forcing function here. There's trillions of dollars getting spent, less now, obviously, with the current recession or whatever, but still, there's still growth, just not hyper growth. And there's still going to be opportunity, because whether the economy is good, bad, or indifferent for the next 3 years, 4 years, 1 year, doesn't matter. People need to solve this problem, and there's opportunity for folks to go do it. So the podcast, we spoke at ETH, their master's program, I don't know, about a month or so ago. And in speaking in my opening address, I'm like, you guys are the future. You can really make the difference. This isn't just an old business guy standing up in front of you. This is the reality, is what they do will impact the planet. And that 100 people in the room are in a unique position to get funded, are in a unique position to start companies that really disrupt. And to me, that's an amazing time, an amazing thing. And it's if I was at the beginning of my career, I wish I'd be there. I'm ending my career in this space where, for me, I've already said my next company has to be a renewable company. It has to be about energy transition, because that's what I'm passionate about. That's what wakes me up in the morning, and that's what I want to do. So I don't just want to be in energy. I want to be in the energy transition. That's how I want to do. So the next startup I do, when I do an exit from this one, you'll see me doing something energy transition.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. I got to know you over 2 years now discussing this. So I see your passion. I got to ask you one question, though. You do a lot of work on the universities. You mentioned ETH. We've done quite a few of these meet the boss kind of a thing, where you bring, some of our leaders from the podcast.
Energy Access Live.
Energy Access Live. Thanks for the explanation. But one thing, when I graduated university and where I come from, the people that went to the energy industry was usually engineers, and they were looking for kind of a safe harbor. You get a job in an engineer company, you work your way up, and you're kind of stable. The people that went into where we come from, which is the .com or the communication, was more the cowboys that were looking for a wild ride and something that's changing. But when you speak to the students today, and you go to engineering, one of the top engineering schools in Europe, at least, if not the world, with ETH, do you see that kind of? Does it bring back a little bit from the communication era and the kind of the DNA of those kind of persons, that yes, energy is now becoming extremely sexy. It's becoming something that is transforming, and we see a lot of opportunities? Or is it still saying that we're going to do, I'm an engineer, I'm just going to refine what's always been done?
So let's be transparent. So we spend a lot of time in Houston. I do spend time in Houston quite a bit. Houston is energy capital of the world, despite living here in a commodities capital in Switzerland. There's quite a bit of energy out of Houston, and there's also quite a bit of people that understand that even if hydrocarbons are on their way down, that there's still need and emphasis there. So I was really surprised when I started working with a few of the more legacy companies that they could find employees, because I couldn't imagine being 20-something and thinking I would want to go do hydrocarbons. But I think it's a function of your background, the economics and other things there. But there are some wonderful people that want to do that. And then there's others that took these kind of degrees and are doing things like carbon sequestration. They're doing other things to help improve the industry. So that's one track.
Yep.
Then the majority of the folks that I'm meeting that want to be in energy are Gen Z, and they just want to be doing the right thing. They want to make an impact. So yes, they're willing to go work for a company, but I think what they want to do is kind of look at what they're doing. So it's different than the .coms, where, for me, the .coms was an extension of growing up in the 80s and seeing the Reagan era and Gordon Gekko, and everybody wanted to be a pharmaceutical sales rep back then, because that was where the big bucks were, right? And then the .coms came along, and it was good, or commercial real estate. There were different trends along the way, whereas if you wanted to make significant upside, you went and joined. I think the difference here is, and I know a number of tech people, in fact, most of my tech friends have transitioned from just general technology to energy, because they can make an impact, right? So you can do something amazing. You can still make a significant return. There's still people that are going to make a lot of wealth doing the right thing as you drop energy costs down, as you make it accessible to everybody. There's still opportunity in these businesses. And I think the sharp young folks that see that. Now, I don't just get engineers, though. I get people across the board that are reaching out, whether they're coming into the Future Leaders program. We do quite a bit with some of the MBA program. We're working with Harvard's MBA program. There was a number of energy students involved there. So it wasn't just the MIT types that we were talking to. It was also the business folks that are really doing a lot. And pretty much every major MBA program has an energy program. And so when we work with the student clubs, we find the business angle as well, because you can't grow these kind of businesses in the speed without the entire team. Yes, I need someone to design and engineer something. Yes, I need software engineers, but I also need marketing people. I need sales people. I need the entire gambit to make this out. And that's why the opportunity is so exciting for young people today.
Which I think is wonderful, and we had a few of them on. I think I remember also one of the episodes we have on with one of our climate. How should we put it?
The one that said I was wrong about everything.
Probably yes.
He said, Chris, everything you said so far is just inaccurate.
Even though we like a little bit of controversy on the show, that's interesting. But I think it's interesting because we talk about. And we had numbers on the show. I do this because I want to change the world. I do this because of this, the greater good, etc., etc. But surely at the back of their head, and that's what Elon Musk said about Tesla as well. And he became the richest man in the world in literally 10 years. So surely it's as you mentioned, we're seeing also quite a bit of the financial and the commercial side of this one, similar to what we did in the
But it's still the Wild West, right?
So, for sure.
So the problem is, and we've had this with solar developers and wind developers, is you can basically anoint yourself an expert in the field. You come into energy, you're an energy expert. Now, the divide that I've seen is there's the legacy, the kind of companies you came from, the traditional operators. They see the new people come in and say there's no way a techie or this person can come in and solve this problem because we've been doing this a long time. We've got the experience. We understand the energy market. They don't understand. They're not going to be successful. And both you and I came from telecom, and we know no matter how much you want that to be the case, that doesn't always apply. Now, certainly there are lessons that were learned. There's certainly things in the regulatory space and things that you need to have the experience to do, but it doesn't mean there aren't disruptors coming in to change it. And it doesn't mean there's not a lot of opportunity to make wealth. But I don't think the majority of the young people I meet are really concerned about wealth. They're concerned about having something that's rewarding to them, making enough to be comfortable and do whatever their lifestyle demands. But they're not looking to be, yes, I do know a few people that have shown me a picture of a super yacht and they'd love to have that, which no matter how inconsistent that is with your desire to be in renewable energy, because it's the most inefficient thing you could have, but they still have that desire and they want to help people, right?
No, I totally, and I think that's noble. Maybe I'm a little bit.
How is owning a super yacht noble?
No, not the super yacht of yacht, of course, but the whole concept of working for not just a profit, but I'm pretty sure with the money we're starting to see coming into this, you got a platform. You look at what we used to do in my previous job. We did software for energy management as well as EV charging. You know, we've had a few on the show as well that talked about this whole ecosystem of EV charging. If we come back to that, and some of them you can almost see that what we're waiting for is one of the big ones just to pick us up.
Yeah, I think,
which is fine.
But
which
I
is
think
fine.
that's why you start businesses, right?
Yeah,
I'm an
for sure.
entrepreneur. I'm in an energy tech that we started a number of years ago. It's maturing. I'm always looking for an exit, right?
No, but what I mean is
that's part of it. And you know what my mom taught me along the way, right? If I have more means, I can do more.
For sure.
Right? So I can either go volunteer and stuff envelopes and do some stuff, or if I have means, if I'm Elon Musk, I can make a choice and go do something dramatic, right? And so I think a lot of these folks will have means because the businesses are going to start being successful. I think the equity groups are going to make money on it. And it comes at a good time, right? There's recession, there's hard places to be. There's just demand across the market to go do this. It's going to be driven, and you know, there's things that are changing the way people worked in the normal world, right?
Yeah,
so
we
robots
also,
are replacing people and things
absolutely.
like that, right? So if you can find a way to go into an industry that you should be able to reinvent yourself 2 or 3 times within that industry over your career, it's a no-brainer to me.
No, for sure, and don't take me wrong, I'm a big fan of it as well. And you start looking at the reinvestment that happens. You know, you look at the IT investments out of the Scandinavian, you know, obviously being Scandinavian, you see a few of the big ones, iSettle, Spotify, and a few ones. They raise so much money, and a few of the founders and a few of the people that were there in the beginning, Klarna being one of them as well, they didn't exit with a lot of money, but that money got invested in the ecosystem again. I think we're starting to see that coming into the renewables as well. Not just the startup companies are doing the exits, but it's reinvested in more new technologies. You just mentioned it yourself. Once you do your next exit, you're back into renewable or back into the energy, focus on renewable. So I think that's going to feed the system even more.
I totally agree. So we've had kind of a roundabout conversation. This is a fireside
we always
chat.
do.
As we bring this kind of a close, 2023 is an exciting year for Insider's Guide. We've got a lot of content growing. We've got some new players. Those ETH students. We have 2 or 3 of them have joined us as producers. We've got the team that we had from last year. We continue to grow. What do you want to see happen on the podcast personally? Is there a guest that you're dying to see or a topic that we haven't covered? What do you want to see in 2023? And those of you listening, please send in. We get a ton of email from you. Don't be afraid to send in an email, or when we're in one of your towns, have a beer with us and tell you what you want to hear, because we'll do it. But right now, I want to know what Johan wants.
There's the more you go into this one, the more you realize that you don't know. I think that's a good starting point. So there's a few guests that I always wanted on. And a few people. Obviously, Elon Musk would be great to have on. So, Elon, if you're listening to this one, give me a call and we'll get you on. Don't worry. There are certain areas that I think will be interesting. Maybe even more from a regulatory point of view. It might be a boring topic, but it's such vital.
But it's funny. So Dominic, who just joined us as a producer on the main show, and he's still getting brought into the show.
Yeah.
Policy and regulatory is his thing. The first list of 5 or 6 guests that he was hoping to bring on. So the way we work at Insider's Guide is we're a team. So yes, we kind of dictate top down, but at the end of the day, we all decide what we want to do, including our producers. So those of you that want to meet people in the industry, do volunteer with us, because you will. And he made this list and he said, hey, you guys don't do enough policy. You don't do enough regulation. And literally his first 5 or 6, the spreadsheet he sent me his first week on board was, I want these guys to be on your show. So pretty good chance, since our newest producer wants that you may get that this year.
You see, it comes around. It comes around. But this is what I like about the show as well. I think we've done this. We have a curiosity. We've had some fantastic guests that helped us to curate this curiosity to a certain point. But the more we talk about it, I think the more we see a little bit the directions we're going, and we see the different pieces.
So what I want to see is we got this set up. For those of you watching the video, you can see we have mics for a couple more people. So I'm waiting for Johan to use some of his local connections to get a few more beers and have all of us sitting around a table or in the living room sitting, and have 3 or 4 of us and have a conversation in a room together, just like we're doing today. I think that would be fun. And I think we'll go back and revisit some of the content we had. What I find is every time we have a new show, it just creates more questions for me, and it accelerates the where we go. What I hope happens as well is like it did last year. We had this whole pocket of MIT startups. They were amazing. Like the stories, the success is what I think will happen is we'll have another pocket of really interesting guests to bring along some of their colleagues. And that's why I call it serendipitous. I have no idea what topics will be, but it's going to be amazing.
I agree. I look forward to it.
I'm
look forward to working with you.
The rest of 2023. For our audience, I hope you've enjoyed this kind of fireside chat. It's been fun for me. It's been a little bit of reminiscent, a little bit of insight into how Johan and I work. We're clearly very different. If you watch the YouTubes and you watch me roll my eyes every time Johan goes, but let's go back to that point. We're different people, but the feedback I get from the audience is you both appreciate that we have different perspectives, or you all appreciate that we have a different perspective. And it's fun for me. So we look forward to 2023.
Look forward to hearing from you guys.
For our audience, if you haven't yet subscribed, if you haven't shared with your friends, please do. And we will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.